Hi everyone, in this tutorial I'll walk you through how I built these light gradient visuals in touchdesigner. The final effect feels complex and layered, but it is built from a few simple ideas. So even if you are a beginner, you can follow along quite easily, and this is a good exercise for learning how to build refined visuals from basic forms. The key to recreating this effect is combining simple shapes, adding dynamics to the shape such as the blur and the gradients, and some motions to move things around. If you understand this well, you can use the same logic to create many different soft and atmospheric visuals. I think most of the visuals can be built quite quickly, but what makes the difference between good visual and strong visual usually come down to motion, timing, depth inside the composition, also storytelling part. With that being said, that's normally the improvement from 90 to 98 differences, and I would argue that 90 is already pretty good for live shows. So without further ado, let's get started. The motion I created is driven by two main circles. The first is the blurry central form, and the second is a slowly shifting background. To build the first one, add a circle top and connect it to a blur. This is the parameter I'm using if you are interested. Yeah, this is just old and 1.7. And then you add a ramp. Animate the ramp using Amsterdam seconds divided by 10 or divided by 3. Find a speed that works for your audio. And then connect both of them to Luma Blur. Connect the circle to the first input and the ramp to the second input. So how the Luma Blur works, it takes two inputs. The first input 0, is the object you want to blur, and the second input 1, that tells the texture where and how much blur to apply. And then after that, you add a corp. You can either use the audio input or a predefined data value to drive it. The key idea here is to use the corp, the data, to drive different shapes. The different shapes the corp cuts out are the things created this rich dynamic effect. And finally, add another ramp to give the shape a gradient color. Once you have this circle, you just duplicate again and shift the size, rotation, etc. and then apply a different corp direction. Then simply combine two of them together. Find a composition you like. In here, I'm using pin light. Until here, that's 90% of the visuals. It's pretty simple. And if you are still interested in the rest, 8%, I will show you a few different things I did here to make it more refined or dynamic. The first is I'm using two different speeds to drive the circle movement. Here I'm using an LFO and using ramp frequency 0.1, and then change the range. You need to test out the range yourself, and then in here I've used speed fast, change the name here, and one speed slow, I lower down the frequency, and then use these two values to drive the crop button and crop right of the circle. And the goal here is to make the visual feel layered in depth. First, you need to decide which object is the main object, and that becomes your front layer, and then let that layer carry more motion, which means move faster, while all the rest and the background goes behind more slowly. This follows the logic of motion parallax. Layers that feels closer usually appear to move faster, while distant layers drift more gently. It helps with the visual hierarchy. Understanding the basics of motion design, or you have a design foundation, it will make visual looks better. Then add a background variation This is the second thing, no, this one. This is the second thing I did. So after the composite, I add the transform. In here, I change the background color, so you see the greenish color here. Then after I have this, normally add a level, I will change the brightness, contrast, etc. Then change to a fit if you want to change the resolution. And then I add to another level. No, actually this one is just for display. Never mind. I add the background texture. So to compare the one with and without, I will show you now. This one on the left is the one with background texture, and the right one is without. I map the kick and snare to the texture. So you'll see every time the kick and snare hits, it will have more dynamics. How to achieve that? You need two noise, very blurry one, so you just increase the period and connect it to a displays. And in the second one here, using the kick count to drive the seed of the texture. So every time it hits, it will return you a new different pattern. And then I combine them together, the texture and this one together using an overlay. Then I add a level, turn the green one to the purple one. I'm sure when you experiment, you can create so many different other colors, just a matter of numbers you use. That's basically it. And one last thing is the ramp, the default ramp setup. You can only change the color by dragging the palette here or changing from the, I will add one here, changing from the table dot. So if you want to change it to another color, you can change here or change it over here. But both these two doesn't allow us to use dynamic data to drive it. So if you work with audiovisual, you would want to use, for example, your audio to drive it. I talked about how to do this in detail in another tutorial, which I will link on the top. You can check them out. And otherwise, happy creating. I think that's all how I created this visual. Hope you found this useful, and I will see you next time. If you want the exact project files, remix-ready templates, and commercial use assets, they're all on my Patreon. Download and project notes included, so you can remix faster and focus on what you do best. And support me to create more visual assets for you. See you next time!